I think like "Heaven Is a Half Pipe" was a huge song, right? Like it was a huge song everywhere, and obviously like the sales number for anything that was big back at that point was like diminished because nobody was fucking buying any music, right?
Yeah.
But like I think the transition from that record to like the next couple of records, like transitioned OPM from being like a radio band to like a touring band and a lifestyle band. You know what I mean? Like, for sure.
Yeah.
And you had Big B's handsome ass up there. Fucking.
Yeah. Can't go wrong with that.
Yeah.
The sound of my body coming through your stereo, live on the radio. This is the sound of my body coming through your stereo, live on the radio. We stood the test of time and made it through just fine. Before these beats of mine, turn up the volume, carry the meters. Don't ask us where we've been, we'll fight until the end. So here we go again.
Yeah.
All right, sweet. Okay. Welcome to the MNO Show with Kevin Zinger of Regime, SRH, etc., etc., etc.
I can't wait to get into the et ceteras.
The third one is the one.
Yeah, right. I saw you on that one. Before we get there, though, let's go way back. Where did you grow up?
I was born in Los Angeles, but when I was younger, I was fortunate enough where my parents had a place in San Clemente too, so I kind of split my time between LA and San Clemente. I moved out of my parents' house when I was like just turning 16, so I was like a sophomore in high school and had my own apartment, and I lived there. I lived in LA in the wintertime.
Can you do that? Back then, maybe?
My parents were cool with it, and my parents were just like,
They signed the lease, or do you sign the lease?
no, there was no lease. It was like a little shitty, like, studio thing. You know what I mean? In the back of an apartment building. It was pretty unofficial. But when you're 16 years old, it was like a mansion. You know what I mean?
Freedom.
But then I spent all my summers in San Clemente. And when I was 17, I graduated from high school. I moved to Cabo San Lucas. And then from Cabo, I moved to Mission Beach in San Diego.
How old were you when you were in Cabo?
17 to 18.
That must have been an interesting experience at that age.
It was,
What were you doing there?
well, I was delusional and thought I was going to be a professional surfer, and I went
Okay,
down
that
there.
makes sense.
Yeah. And I went down there to quote unquote train to surf, but I trained my liver at drinking a little bit more than probably surfing.
I think a lot of people do that in Cabo.
Yeah, but I mean, back then there was nothing in Cabo. It was literally like the bar called Giggling Marlin. We lived behind the bar, and in a camper, and that's what we did.
Oh, no way.
It was fun.
No way. And then, so after Cabo, you said where'd you go?
Mission Beach in San Diego.
Okay.
And so like all like I guess what you would call your formidable years were down there.
Yeah, and that's where things started happening in music with you, right?
Yeah, that's right. So like when I was, when I was a kid, I was sponsored from surfing, so I would go to all the trade shows. So I knew like, the surf world and the skate world, and then going to like shows and punk bands and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And when I was 18, I was living in Mission Beach. I knew a lot of people. My partner, who's still my partner in the clothing company, SRH at the time, was throwing a club, and it was a 21 and up club. I wasn't even old enough to get into it. And he invited me to go to it, and I went, and there was like maybe like 20, 30 people there. And he not snuck me in, he knew the bouncers and was
Right.
just let me in. And I hung out for a little bit, and I was like, there's nobody here, I'm gonna split. A couple days later, I went over there, and he said, hey, do you want to partner up with me on that club? And I was like, dude, I'm not even old enough to get in. And he's like, don't worry about it, the owner will be cool with it, I got you. And so I was like, look, give me like 3 weeks, and let's do this right, you know what I mean? And I got a couple bands from LA, and put together like a proper flyer and put it out there. And that's kind of how I got into the music business. And we would take like surf films and put them with the bands that were in the surf films. And it was like a Tuesday night. And the first week we did it, it was like 500 people. The second week, it was like 800 people. By the third week, it was like lying around the block, couldn't get in. The place held like 1,000 people. And it was like
what bands were you bringing in there?
Pennywise, Sublime. There was a band from up here called Coup d'Etat, Shrinky Dinks, which turned into Sugar Ray, 311, Incubus. I mean,
What year was this?
this was like when we started was 91.
That's crazy.
And that era went from like 91 to like the early 2000s, maybe 99, when I was like a club promoter.
Wow.
I turned 21 and I threw my 21st birthday party, and by then I parlayed it, and I was doing like probably like 4 or 5 nights a week, and invited all the club owners to my 21st birthday party, and they're like, wait. But yeah, that's how I got into the music business. At first, it was just like
Thank you.
doing clubs, and again, I thought I was a good surfer, and I was sponsored at the time.
Right.
But I was making peanuts, right? And then all of a sudden, you're a club promoter, the girls, the fun, the money. It was like, yeah, fuck this surfing shit. I'm gonna
But I think surfing has like the promotion of surfing, and then like the sponsors and that type of stuff. You probably had a kind of a taste of how that stuff worked, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
is that what
yeah,
where
well,
your brain was kind of
Yeah.
in back then with the stuff that you were playing with?
For me, it was like surf culture was like at that time was like very like well, it still is. It's like very corporate. So I always like identified more with like skate culture and punk rock.
Right.
So I knew there were other surfers like me out there. And when I like put these nights together, like all those bands that I mentioned, from Sublime to Pennywise, they were nothing back then. But I'd heard about them, and this was pre-internet, pre any of that stuff. So you just heard through the grapevine and scenes, and you would get tapes or CDs or whatever of these bands. And so eventually, like, we built up through the SRH thing, like a name where people knew like it's going to be like a certain kind of thing, a certain kind of vibe. And
Right. So that's where SRH.
yeah,
That's where you
originally
kind
SRH was like a little crew of guys from the beach. And so when I started doing clubs, I just tagged it SRH Presents.
Okay.
Yeah. And then from doing all those clubs, eventually my clothing sponsor was Gotcha. I don't know if you remember that clothing company, but they clipped me and were like, you're not doing what you're supposed to do as a surfer, because I mean, you go to a contest Saturday morning, there's 80 guys in it, you know what I mean? I'm
Right.
showing up late, hungover, don't want to be there. I just made like $4,000 the night before doing clubs.
Right.
When, I was a 19, 20-year-old kid. Like, I was like, so
Right.
I don't blame them for dropping me, but I
Right.
never even liked their clothes anyways. They would send me boxes of clothes, and I would take it back to the surf shop and go buy Dickies and go buy like the stuff that I like to buy. So eventually along the way, after Gotcha basically dropped me, I went to my partner and I was like, look, I want to start a clothing company, because I figured like there were so many people that like we created like a little scene with like the music thing.
Right.
I knew that, like I said, there was no internets, but I just figured there were more people that wanted to dress like how we dress down there, at least up the coast, and probably up the coast on the East Coast too.
Right.
So I just wanted to give it a go and start a clothing company. And I mean, I didn't know anything about clothing, but I knew what I liked, and I just
Right.
tried to make that kind of stuff. I mean, when we first started, it was like hats and T-shirts. And then when we tried to do like cut and sew, like literally the first time we went to go like make like real stuff, I like cut out this pattern for a flannel shirt, and it was and then we were gonna make shorts, and I took it to this Korean lady. I drove up to LA and I bought like these big like bundles of denim and big bundles of flannel. And I brought it to this Korean lady and was like, okay, make flannel shirts and denim shorts. Well, she mixed it up. and she ended up making denim shirts and flannel shorts. So when you put on the shirt, it was like cardboard, and then you put on the shorts and you went like that, and it just ripped from end to end. So
in that case, it wasn't a happy mistake.
no,
It didn't work out.
I took some lumps in the early days of it for sure. But yeah, that's kind of how that whole part of it started.
Interesting. And so what year? So you stayed in San Diego. You ended up coming back up to LA, obviously, right?
Yeah. So along the journey, the clothing company started to do pretty good. The club and concert promotion stuff started to do pretty good. A band from San Diego called Sprung Monkey, and at the time they were like the biggest thing in San Diego. This was like pre-Blink 182, pre-Unwritten Law. Like those guys were around, but they were like the Groms, you know what I mean? But Sprung Monkey was a big deal back then down there, and they were like, hey, do you want to manage me? And I was like, I don't know anything about management. And they're like, you didn't know anything about the other stuff, and that worked. And I was like, yeah, fuck, I'll give it a go.
Right.
And so
You're looking for something to do.
I
I'm just joking.
Yeah. I just thought, I have ADD, so I just turned it into like
Right.
businesses. So I started managing them, and it started to work, And then from there, I just started managing other bands, Cottonmouth Kings, and that was like around 97, I think, or something like that. And, when I first started managing them, it was more of like a Sex Pistols kind of thing. Like, we weren't taking it that serious, you know what I mean? It was almost like, I don't want to say a joke because it wasn't a joke, but we were like, fuck the industry, we're just going to do this ourselves. And even before that, because of all the bands that we were booking at the shows, and I would do these little compilations, Interscope Records, I knew the guy who was running Interscope Records' brother. And so his brother told the guy about me, and he started calling me like, hey, will you come up to LA and come to Interscope Records? And like, my point of reference with record labels was like SST and, punk labels, and then like, Def Jam and like hip hop labels. I didn't even know what Interscope was, you know what I mean? And the guy's
Right.
like, yeah, come on up to LA. And I was like, nah, I'm good, thanks. I don't want to drive up there. You know what I mean? They're like, what are you talking about? Like, but I had no point of reference. I just didn't know how big of a company they were, and didn't
Right.
care really at the time. But, they persisted. So I created a relationship with them, and I ended up doing like a compilation that had like, Pennywise and Offspring and a bunch of bands, and we put it out. And through that whole journey was the same time that the Cottonmouth Kings came in my life. And so the guy that was running Interscope at that time was just like knocking him out of the block. Like, he was just, No Doubt, Nine Inch Nails, Marilyn, like signing everything and going huge. So he wanted to sign the band, and because he wanted to sign the band, every other label in LA wanted to sign him. You know what I mean?
Right.
And they hadn't even heard the music. It was almost like a joke to us. Like, they'd never heard one fucking anything. They hadn't heard the music, and they're giving us these crazy offers. And, we were like young punker kids who were just like kind of like making a joke of the whole thing. You know what I mean? And it was like, let's see how far we can drive this up. You know what I mean? Like, and I remember one time I was in the backyard of my parents' house, and I get this phone call, and the guy goes, hey, it's Rick Rubin. And I'm like, and I knew who Rick Rubin was because fucking Slayer, Beastie Boys, the guy did amazing shit. And I thought it was my buddy Mac from San Diego because he sounds like him.
Screwing with
and
you.
I'm like, yeah, fuck off, Mac. What's up? How you doing? He's like, pause, like, hey, this is Rick Rubin. And I'm like, yeah, Mac, and I'm fucking Daffy Duck or whatever the fuck I said. And he's like, no, this is Rick Rubin. I'm like, holy shit, this is Rick Rubin. But yeah, and then from
So
there,
what was Rick Rubin calling about?
to sign the band.
Okay.
Yeah.
He wanted to sign him.
Yeah, I mean, it was nuts. It was like the biggest deal of that year for like a new signing. And nobody heard the music. That's how funny the music business is. Like,
Right.
literally, people were like $1 million deals without even hearing fucking one lick of music.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. This is well before our paths crossed, and I I was in Hollywood at that time. Like I don't remember, I think I was probably at Island, and I remember when like the buzz started bubbling, and I went and saw their show. They played the Dragonfly, and it was like everyone was talking about it. It was I think like the buzz on it wasn't that like they were gonna get signed or anything. It was just, you know, you got to see the show. And it was at the end of the set, they did a cover of American Girl. Is that right?
Yeah.
And then because, you know, like Zinger was a promoter and Brad was also a promoter, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like I didn't realize I was just standing in the crowd watching the show, and I was like, oh, this is fucking dope. Like they're like white boys just doing their thing, b-boys, you know, stuff. And then all of a sudden they did that song, and then they invited girls up to come sing on the stage, and then all of a sudden like just like half the crowd went up onto the stage, and you're just sitting there looking at like it was like all of the hottest chicks in LA are all on the stage, and you're like, wait, what the fuck, what is happening? And there was like, and they were all just bouncing around with like, you know, bikinis, and like it was like, what is happening right now? Like it was a spectacle,
Because
like,
we stacked the deck. Because both Brad and I were club promoters, so we had access to all these people.
Yeah.
But nobody knew that, and so we would put the band in front of like, you know, a packed crowd of like beautiful girls and fucking all the like coolest people or whatever you want to call it, right? And
Right.
And the band, like, we just told them like, go out there and go fucking nuts. You know what I mean? And it just went nuts. And
Seems like the right formula.
it was a great formula, because then after they all came off the stage, and then the band comes out and they're all hanging, like, wow, we're now in the coolest party in LA right now.
Right.
Because like all the girls are here right now. Like, yeah, it was pretty awesome.
Yeah,
And it definitely, like, the buzz on that was just, it was like bubbling, and it was like, oh yeah, these guys are getting signed. Like, and then it was like after I was like, man, I don't even know if I was like paying attention to any of their music or anything. I was like, but those dudes are dope.
That was the funniest
Yeah.
part. Is like it was like almost like secondary was
Yeah,
the music.
exactly,
It was
yeah.
like we just created this whole weird
No,
scene.
it was like a spectacle.
And it was before like there was not that many points of reference for like white boys doing hip hop, right?
Right.
It was like, you know, House of Pain, fucking definitely awesome, fucking killer group, Beastie Boys, but then it was like, you know, you had fucking Vanilla Ice and da-da-da. This was like pre-Eminem, pre-anything, and it was like, you know, I came from the punk background, right? So like even like the punk scene, like when I started doing that band, like everybody in the punk scene was like, the fuck are you doing, Zinger? You know what I mean? Like, why are you doing this? And I was like, we're just having fun and making it more punk than punk is, because at that point punk started to get a little bit boring for me, because that's when pop punk started to come
it was
out.
like
You know?
when hair metal happened.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, oh, this is over.
So for us, it was like, let's just make this punk rock. You know what I mean? I can remember one time they did like a showcase, and they told us, it was at the Viper Room, and they told us, do not invite any of your friends. We just want to watch the band play. We're like, yeah, sure, no problem, right? And we fucking called all these like strippers, all our friends, and just made a full mockery of it. Fucking Saint jumps off the stage and lands on the table where the president of the label was sitting, knocks drinks all over the guy, literally like just drenches him. The guy gets up and walks out the door, and I'm like, well, I guess we're not getting signed to that label. An hour and a half later, the guy's calling me like, offering us crazy money to like sign it. I was like, okay, so the more of a mockery we make out of this, the more they want to give us money. So
Showbiz.
that was fun.
Yeah.
So when did you guys connect then? So it must have been getting close to the point.
Well, I knew about OPM before we met, you know what I mean? Because there wasn't like there was like Sublime, and like, you know, now there's this whole massive scene with hundreds and hundreds of those bands, right?
Right.
But like back then it was like there was only a handful of them, you know. I knew Slightly Stupid because they were from my local neighborhood, and I owned a surf shop back then, and they hung out there, but
Who were the others at that time?
there really wasn't that many.
Yeah, it was like
OPM,
Sublime was like, you know, like, so there was the ska movement, basically.
That's
the
right.
American ska
Right.
movement, right? And like Sublime was able to break into that because they had Date Rape, which was a huge hit, but only here. Like, you know, when you lived here, you thought it was,
K-Rock and
but it
91
wasn't the
Express.
rest of the world,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And then they did the Sublime record, and then Bradley passed, and then that record, you know, went like international basically or whatever. But so like to me as a fan of music and them being like my idols basically, they did the same progression that like Bob Marley did. They were a ska band, and then they evolved into kind of like a more of a reggae thing. But obviously at the core they were like punk rock, which is like, you know, saying like I grew up the same background as Zinger in a lot of ways, where like, you know, the core of everything was punk rock, hip hop, and skateboarding and surfing, and it was a lifestyle thing, and all this stuff that we're talking about, like it ultimately we'll probably get there, but like it evolved into a lifestyle movement in a sense, right? Like where it was more about, like you said, it was more, even with us, it was more about the lifestyle. It was a lot more about the skateboarding thing than it was about the music, right? Like it was like, you know, the same with the Kings as us and a lot of other ones. Like we got signed because we were like, I can say it now, I wouldn't say it then, but like we were cool kids, but we weren't like musicians. You know what I mean? Like we got a record deal as like being cool, but not.
You became
You know, I have never been and never will be known as like a great musician, right? But I've had a great music career.
You made some great songs.
Yeah, but just being creative and being a fan of music and all that kind of stuff was kind of what happened. But anyways, to me, like when that happened with Sublime, I was like, oh, that's gonna be the future of music, you know. And so that was where I was, you know, I was kind of, I think, maybe a little bit ahead of it, right? Because it's happened, you know, recently. Hey, chef, call in the chef.
Call in
Carrie.
The chef.
the chef.
Chef just dropped off some fish tacos and 2 all-day breakfast sandwiches, which is a new special.
Looks delicious.
What do you got, chef?
The new addition to the special menu. It's the all-day breakfast sandwich. That's porchetta, organic eggs.
Porchetta, organic eggs. Where are the eggs from? The eggs, where are we getting the eggs from right now?
Chino Valley.
Chino Valley.
They're local.
Local eggs.
Just some arugula, kale,
Arugula, kale, shaved fennel.
morita,
What's the aioli? Morita? Chili morita? I'm butchering that in smoky chili. Nice. Fish tacos, those are cod. What's the batter? Ale. Is it rice batter? Yeah, rice batter with ale.
So it's gluten free.
It is gluten free.
Nice.
Chef hooks it up.
That's right.
It looks a little better than the Jack in the Box all-day breakfast sandwich that I'm used to.
Awesome. Thank you, chef.
Thank you.
Thanks, Carrie.
Yeah. To touch on what you were talking about, though, I think the difference was like back then, like now, today's music is like so singles driven and it's like one song, right?
Right.
So like back then, like, you know, the word lifestyle is so fucking cheesy now, but like back then it wasn't, right? And like bands were like creating lifestyles and like there was full records. So that's why people were interested in bands like Sublime, or, you know what I mean? It
Yeah.
was like they were buying into this whole thing
Yeah.
because the people that became fans bought into the whole thing. Where today it's just like a singles driven market, right? Like one song and you hear it and then you don't hear about the people anymore as much. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I definitely want to dig into that. Let's dig
Grab
into
that
the
one.
food first.
Let's.
I want to dig into that topic though, because I'm definitely have some interest in like the singles versus the. But let's
Grab one.
eat first.
I mean, this thing looks delicious.
Yeah.
I mean, with Sublime, like literally, I used to do Sublime every Thursday night for free, dollar drafts, and like the punker guy, like all my punk friends would be like, "What are these guys? Like, they can't figure out if they're reggae or punk rock and fucking da da. What is this?" Like, they'd get all like almost angry, you know what I mean? Because they were like trying to be like punk rock purists, and I'd be like, "No, that's the point, you dipshit. They're like doing something new, you know what I mean?" And like. And through Sublime, like, you know, obviously we all knew about like the the Steel Pulses, the Bob Marleys, and da-da-da, but like Sublime helped expand a lot of people's mind into like what reggae was, you know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, like I remember we did that show one time with the Cottonmouth Kings, and remember for a minute you had
X-Clan.
X-Clan.
Yeah, dude, X-Clan was one of my favorite hip-hop
dude,
groups, and
yeah.
I was like, it was such a fucking honor for me to...
Yeah.
That
So
was
we
what...
I played a show with those guys.
Yeah, yeah.
I was like,
it was crazy. I was like, I'm putting out an X-Clan record for
Yeah.
you. You're like, I'm playing
a show with X-Clan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like, it was the biggest honor ever. And
Yeah.
that was what opened my eyes to realize, like, holy shit, like,
Yeah.
this truly is a young man's game. Because
Yeah.
I put my heart and soul into it, put my money where my mouth was, really tried to fucking make that record happen. And it was a great record.
Yeah.
Brother Jay is still one of the best lyricists
Yeah.
out there. Fucking couldn't give it away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Broke my heart. Almost broke my bank.
Yeah. No, and I got
But
to,
it's just the truth,
I got
you
to
know?
go in there and track vocals with him and stuff during that time. When
Yeah.
I was engineering for you a bunch then, and like, and I've worked with a lot of people in the studio, and one thing that was super unique about him was that like, just basically when you're laying. Maybe a lot of people don't understand whatever, but like doubling on your vocals and whatnot. Like, so like in hip hop, it's like it's a common thing. Like you would say like the line, and then at the end you kind of double just the end to give it like a little bit of punch.
Right.
And which is super common. But what he would do is he would go through, he'd write it out, and then he would have, you know, like a lot of times like people like highlight or whatever the end, whatever, where which words they want to be on the double. He would go through his first take and he would lay the double. So it would be like no line, and then the end line.
Yeah, yeah.
And then just as music. And then this line rhymes with that line.
Why would he do
And
it
then
like that?
because he would get so deep in the pocket.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then he would go back and lay the lead track on top. And like I've never known anyone else to be able to do that. And then I've
crazy.
obviously tried it, and it's near impossible. You know, like there's no way I could ever do that. But yeah, that was pretty. I mean, he's a legend. You know.
I mean, I don't regret any of it, even though it didn't work out financially. It was fucking just an honor. I mean, and we got KRS-One and Brother Jay to do their first track together. And so like I'm in the studio with KRS-One and Brother Jay, and I'm like,
Yeah.
some surfer dude from, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm like, this is fucking badass.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But
So when you guys got connected, what time was that? So you
Yeah,
guys
so
started
what's
working
your-
together.
I take a lot of punches to the head, so I'm not good with time.
It would have
2000
been 2000, maybe 2001.
Yeah.
Maybe yeah, probably maybe 2002. Somewhere right there. Early
All right.
2000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're so. Johnny mentioned the Napster thing earlier, right?
Right.
Like, the major labels, like, they wanted to fight Napster. They wanted to, like, you know, it's never going to work, right? Like, they wanted to tell kids, like, don't download this music. You're stealing. And, like, if you're a kid, you get $20 a week, right? And you're like, wait a second, like, I can get the music for free now, and I can spend the $20 on a sack of weed or some beer or buy my little girlfriend lunch or whatever it is. What do you think they're going to do? They're going to download the music for free. There was no fighting that, right? So, like, all the major labels, like, they had their own formula to what success was, right? So, like, even though OPM had a massive amount of success, right? Like, these major labels, like, they invest hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars into bands, but it doesn't sell 1 million records, and they're just like, walk away from it, right? And like, I saw all that going down and was like, you know, I don't want to pretend like I was like some business genius dude, but I was like, wait a second. Like, if we own this restaurant together and it doesn't work out, we don't just drop the keys on the floor and walk out the door and go later, right? We sell the fucking refrigerator, we sell the fucking TV sets, you know what I'm saying? And like, I'm like, there's all these great bands that these major labels, you know,
Or just dismissing because of their
Dispose
business
of.
plan.
yeah, and like, they're great bands that have already been propped up, you know what I mean? And at the time, like, you know, we were all just figuring out the music business, but like, I was always a very hard worker, you know what I mean? And always just like dug in. So like there
Right.
were a lot of bands like OPM that like and Head PE that came from that major label world that I was fans of musically and came to Suburban Noize, and like it was a huge risk for them, right? Because it was like, you know, they were going from like these big ivory tower companies to like at the time I think we were on like Hollywood and Vine, and it was like
Yeah, you were on
there was
Hollywood.
like 3 or 4 of us in
Yeah.
like some little shitty office with like prostitutes walking around downstairs out in front of the place and panhandlers. It was still when Hollywood and Vine was gritty, right?
Yeah, yeah. It was when I had my studio right around the corner.
Oh yeah, well yeah, you took gritty to the next level.
So what was that first meeting like for you guys when you guys?
I don't even remember how we.
Well,
did
so
meet.
originally it was like, so like you exactly how you said, like, so it was, you know, the era of that, you know, that era for you as a record label owner and a manager and all that stuff. It was kind of the Wild West. So it was not only were you trying to figure it out whatever, but they were also trying to figure it out because they were getting destroyed
Yeah.
by the what they were, you know, at the time it was still called pirating. Like people, Napster and LimeWire was considered pirating.
All those people that had multi-million-dollar jobs that didn't do shit, all of a sudden were
Yeah.
like, "Oh shit, I'm gonna lose my job."
they
Now
were-
they're all real estate agents in the valley.
exactly. So they
Literally.
they were all in a panic. But like you were obviously, you know, a smaller outfit, so you were able to be versatile, and you know you could be agile and you know do all that stuff, whatever. So, but I think like when we kind of knew we were going to get dropped, right? And then, but I think we're still with Atlantic, and we kind of, I remember I had a lawyer. I don't remember which lawyer it was.
Wasn't it Shaw?
It was Shaw,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Brian Shaw. Was
Brian
that-
Shaw?
Yeah, Brian Shaw. Yeah, and Brian
The
Shaw.
Kung Fu lawyer.
Yeah,
He does Krav Maga.
yeah. Brian Shaw was, I don't even know how I ended up with him because we were with Jeffrey Taylor Light prior to that, who was an awesome lawyer. But he obviously, you know, everyone started bailing on us and dropping us. And then I was still in that, like, you know, I like, you know, I started working at Island, and then I was like, oh my God, I want to be on a major label. Like that was my dream, you know. And then I got on a major label, and then it was like I didn't want to give up on that, you know. So initially, you know, Shaw was like, yeah, you need someone to shop you, you know. And then
Yeah, that's right. We weren't working
Yeah.
together on the label side at first. It was more
yeah,
the
in the
management.
beginning you started shopping us.
Yeah, that's right.
And it was like you and Shaw were shopping us to every other label, and like and then it was like, you know, but like in retrospect, like they all, you know, obviously they all knew all the Atlantic people. They're like, no, those guys are fucking, you know, this is, you know, if they would have called and said, what happened with those guys? Oh, well, we spent, you know, $2 million on getting this thing going or whatever, and they sold 70,000 records in the States and, you know, a couple 100,000 in Europe or whatever. So it's like we were in the red.
Right.
You know, like there was debt. Like they were, you know, we failed. You know, had Napster not happened, they wouldn't, or if they would have, you know, if it had been a year after that and they knew what Napster was doing, they wouldn't have spent the $2 million.
Yeah.
They would have kept it more realistic. And if we would have sold the same amount, it would have been a success, right? But we just got caught right in that window where it was like we were on the A team. They were giving us the, you know, the best producers, the best video directors, the best everything we want. They fucking dumped tons of money on the radio. You don't just get on K-Rock for free at that time. Like it costs tons of money.
Black Swan.
Yeah,
That's what they call Black Swan, right?
Yeah.
Comes, swoops in.
yeah. So all that was happening, and so they were like, yeah, you know. And then obviously, like, you know, there was a lineup change, all that shit. So Zinger kind of went for a little bit, and then we're like, well, we're still on Atlantic, so we had to get dropped. So that's when we like brought in Big B. Like that'll get us dropped for sure. So we brought in Big B. We're like, this is the new lineup, and they're like, you're done. And then we like sent them pictures and stuff, and like, this is the new guy, like, because they were literally like, dude,
No
they were,
shirt on,
Yeah.
just like a tattooed big fat dude.
big, yes,
They
exactly.
wanted a pretty
They
boy.
were sending
wanted
us
another
guys.
pretty
Yeah.
boy, yeah.
They literally, Ashley Simpson's dad, who was her manager, like came in with her boyfriend who he was managing, like brought this dude in. He was like a fucking model. He was like, you know, whatever, like you
They
know,
wanted a Backstreet Boys.
yeah,
You guys,
Yeah.
exactly. And we're like, you guys are
Teach him how to rap.
yeah, exactly. Teach him this lifestyle.
Yeah,
you know?
just teach him what you do. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Doesn't work that way,
No,
buddy.
and they sent in a like guy, and we're like, oh my god, they're so they're delusional. It's
You should have
crazy.
just beat his ass and been like, well,
Yeah.
that's the first step to the
Yeah,
lifestyle.
exactly. You need about 100 more of these before you understand where we're coming from. Yeah. So then so then you shopped us for a bit. It was
Yeah.
obviously, and then it was like we started talking about it very early. We're like, and you're like, dude, like even if that doesn't work out, I'll put you on Suburban Noize. It's good. Like let's just give it a shot, you know. We gave it a
Safety
shot.
net.
Yeah, and it was like, it made a lot of sense. And he's like, yeah, I'll put you out with the Kings. You guys tour with the Kings. Made a lot of sense. It was, you know, the lifestyles were similar. Obviously, like we were definitely a black sheep in the genre at that time, because at that time it was Korn and Limp Bizkit and
Yeah, it was like the rap
and
rock.
Papa Roach. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So we were the black sheep there, and then we went, you know, into the independent route there, and we were still the black sheep and it was at that time too, like Cottonmouth Kings already had a major label, and then now they were on their own. They kind of did the same path, right? Like they were Capitol, and then now just Suburban Noize doing their own thing. And it was like they had been out already for a couple years preaching, you know, like fuck the majors, you know, this is where it's at, whatever. And their fan base fucking just dove into that head first, and then also now another, you know, this band is like a major label band, so they're kind of like, fuck these guys, you know. And we were definitely, you know, probably like a bit more polished than like the Kings, you know, like, you know, like not as gritty as those guys on the surface, I think. But yeah, I don't know. So it was always
Yeah,
like
but I think like Heaven is a Half Pipe was a huge song, right? Like
Yeah.
it was a huge song everywhere, and obviously like the sales number for anything that was big back at that point was like diminished because
Yeah.
nobody was fucking buying
Yeah.
any music, right?
Yeah.
But like I think the transition from that record to like the next couple of records, like transitioned OPM from being like a radio band to like a touring band and a lifestyle band.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, for sure.
yeah,
And you had Big B's handsome ass up there. Fucking.
yeah,
Can't go wrong with that.
yeah.
You talk about the new punk rock, like making something else, the new punk rock, right? Like, what's that today for you?
For me, it's like
Are you still doing that, making the new thing punk rock?
I'm always in. My biggest like I don't really have any like super gifts in life, but I'm good at seeing what's about to come.
Mm-hmm.
My worst flaw is not hanging in there long enough, right? So
Right.
like big in the punk scene, tons of credibility, da 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 da, and then I go, fuck the punk scene. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
bored with it, right? And then
Right.
it just goes
As it-
boom and
yep.
blows the fuck up. And then, you know, Cottonmouth was just interesting to me because it was something new and different, right? And
Right.
so then, so I just I've historically like, if I would have kept signing like the next white rapper, but I, you know, and we signed plenty of those, but that wasn't our main focus, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, I've always sort of like walked away from things right as they become like mainstream and huge. But like the thing that I have to be excited to like, because I work my ass off, so it's like when you're putting in 12, 14-hour days, like I hope you're excited about what you're working on. You know what I mean? Because if not, it's fucking tough. But like this new label that we started called Liars Club with like, it's like dark folk music, right? And it's like, to me, like that is sort of like the new punk rock, right? It's like Americana with like super like dark lyrics, and like it's just badass to me. You know what I mean? There's this whole burgeoning scene that's
Interesting.
coming out. Yeah.
And then with like making scenes today, it's harder with digital, right? Like, I mean, people aren't buying the full albums, right? So
People still don't buy full albums.
So how do you do that?
You
then?
know, there's certain like in the scene that I was just talking about, like those people buy vinyl, right?
Okay.
And so they want to hear the whole record. So, like, you know, in today's world, it's all about, well, how many Spotify listeners do you have, right?
Right.
But like, if you look at some bands that like we work with, like Amigo the Devil, right? Like his Spotify listeners aren't even it's not even like a point of how big he is as an artist, right? Because his fans listen to vinyl. They listen to the full record. You know what I mean? Like, they don't listen to Spotify. You know what I mean? So,
As someone that grew up listening to albums, now I'm tempted to ruin the album every time someone's coming out with an album because they'll release a song, and I'm like, man, I really want to listen to that song. I don't want to wait for that album to come out. I'll listen to that song, then a month later they'll release another song. By the time the album comes out, they've already released like 3 or 4 of the songs.
Yeah.
And then I'm listening to the album, and what do I do when that song comes up? Well, I've already listened to that thing like 15 times, so I
skip
skip
right
that
past it.
song, and I don't get the satisfaction of an album to sink into now because I already heard a little bit of it. Now I'm listening kind of the rest of it, and then I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the new
It's
world.
different. It's
No,
different.
It is
World, yeah.
different.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I consume music differently, and I'm an album guy. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
my friend we were listening to Wu-Tang driving along, and get 2 songs into it, and he put something else on. I'm like, why would you do that? You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, that Wu-Tang's on. Like, let's listen to the whole fucking thing, right? But like, even I like, create my own playlists, and like, we all adapt to what the new world is, right? But there's still something that I think like there is gonna like with there's ebbs and flows and everything, right? We're like coming out of like the version of like the cheesy 80s fucking pop mumble rap fucking like it's like that era of today it's just starting to end, right? And it's
Yeah.
like the
Thank
death
you.
of that, and like don't thank me, I didn't get to kill it. I wanted to, but now I think you're like, there's all these like kids, like I'm friends with Rob from Metallica. His kids band Otto is fucking badass. Those kids have the vibe, like they're like a hardcore like thrash band, like DRI meets Suicidal, but they can actually like, they write real songs, and they're like, they dress like how I dressed when I was their age, you know what I mean? Took me 25 years later, but I'm cool again. But like, you know what I mean? Like, it's badass to watch it, and they don't want to hear anything electronic. Like, they're playing guitars, they're playing it. So whenever there's, the mumble rap, techno, EDM takeover, and nothing against all that stuff, it's just not my vibe, right? But there's always going to be a backlash to it.
Right.
And that's my version of what great art is. So like, I'm seeing that, like, there's all these like, there's like a new punk scene of like these like almost like thrash punk band kids that like they'll do shows, they pull up in like a U-Haul and fucking throw it out on the internet, and fucking 500 kids show up under a bridge, and they got a PA in a U-Haul, and they fucking play until the cops show up, and that's punk rock to me, you know what I mean?
Right.
Some 41's new single isn't, you know what I mean? So
Right.
so there is going to be ebbs and flows, and
Yeah. Well, one thing we talk a lot about on the show, and it's kind of interesting to talk about that band.
some 41, do we have to?
No, not that band. Metallica.
Yeah.
Which member was it? You said real
Rob.
fast. Rob.
Yeah.
Passing down to generations.
Yeah.
And teaching generations that next level. One of the things I notice very clearly is because of technology and facets of our life, you can do a lot of things on your own now. And so there's a lot of kids in their bedroom. I used to be in my bedroom playing guitar to be in that band, but now kids are in their bedroom just recording frickin' songs and putting them on Spotify, right? And so
Yeah.
there are no bands, is what it feels like. There's a lack of like collaboration, and that's the coolest stuff ever. Metallica, Rob by himself would have been nothing, right? But you put all those guys together and you create something greater than you ever could have had before. He's passing that down. His kid now has a band, but I don't see new bands coming out. You know what I mean? I just see artists that are collaborating with someone else, and then they'll collaborate with someone else just to get popularity.
Yeah.
And it'd be really cool to see more people passing that down, our generation passing that down to like create a band.
I think you're going to see it. I think like guitar, they say guitar rock or whatever, but I think it's gone away for the last 10 years, right?
Yeah.
I think it's going to come back big, and you're going to see like bands and fucking like, I think it's going to bubble under with this next generation. Because like,
I hope so.
like technology's great, right?
Right.
But like, you can also get sucked into it, and it can be evil as well, right? Or
Right.
or squash the artistic process or whatever it is, right? But like, these kids that I see the new ones coming up, they know how to use it for what that's worth, but they also want to tap into what's sort of like real and natural. Like the 90s are like the thing again for kids that are like 16 and 17 years
Yeah.
old, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And they're looking at bands like, I mean, it was just like when Nirvana came out and crushed hair metal, thank God, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I wasn't even like a huge Nirvana fan. I was a punker and a hip hop kid, but I certainly liked Nirvana more than I liked Rat, you know what I mean, or Poison or whatever
Yeah.
Right.
it was, you know what I mean? So I think we're getting there.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, and it's definitely like it really is always going to boil down to like this art is about songwriting. You know, it's like you can you know, like the lack of songwriting, you know, is like there's so much stuff out there right now that just there's just nothing there. There's no, you know, like
Yeah, I mean, how many times can you talk about a chain in a fucking car?
Yeah,
and,
right.
You know,
it's gotten to levels of silly. It's like I said before, like you just alluded to, like the hair, you know, when you know, heavy metal, like when we, you know, in the day we had Metallica and Slayer, and then all of a sudden, like, so then it went hair, you know, like it just kind of went downhill. And the same with like punk rock, when it just got so, like Offsprings came out, it was just pop, and it was silly and whatever.
Even the reggae, like how many times can we talk about smoking up? Great. I like the music.
Yeah.
We don't, I mean, like, yeah,
well, even the reggae rock scene of like what Sublime and all those guys created, you know, I've been around it forever, you know what I mean? And there's a lot of great bands, but like there's so many bands like that now that like
Yeah.
I can't even wrap my head around 30% of them.
I
you
think
know
the
what mean?
freshest
It's
thing
like,
I've seen lately is Polyphia. You seen Polyphia?
I
No
want to,
lyrics. The craziest guitar stuff I've ever seen in my life.
yeah,
They did a song with Steve Vai recently. Those guys are on a whole new level. It's the first thing I've really seen, like, hey, this is a band and they're doing something totally unique and different.
Let's go.
But
Let's
so
check
one
it
of the
out.
things that we do on every single one of these episodes, is we talk about lessons learned. You look back on your life. You know, what would you tell Zinger when he was 18? Things that you learn now, and everybody that we talk to we talk about this. It takes kind of a different path than most people take, right? So you're definitely have taken that path. You're like serial entrepreneur. You start a billion things. You have vision. What would you tell your 18-year-old self that you've learned now that you're 25?
I mean, there's no shortages of mistakes that I've made, and you know, that causes like whatever you want to call it, pain or regret or whatever. But if you don't go through those things, you don't know what the good stuff is either, right? If there's no,
yep,
if somebody lives a life of having no pain, no struggle, no anything, right? That they're never really gonna understand true happiness and enjoyment either, right? So I'd probably tell my young self to shut up a little bit, but I can still tell my old self to shut up a little bit. But you know, like I've made mistakes just like everybody has, but I don't
Right.
regret any of them. I would regret it if I didn't learn from them. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? And like, you know, I'm a 50-year-old dude, but like, I still like my thing is always trying to challenge myself. You know what I mean? Like, just keep trying to like do new things, whatever that is, right?
Keep it punk rock.
Yeah, not even punk rock, but like, you know, like we were talking about technology, like I've taught myself a lot of random shit from just looking up YouTube, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, because I do so much crazy stuff from, you know, surfing to fighting to whatever, you get injured a lot, right? And so an old timer told me a long time ago, he goes, you know, there's all these things that you want to do, whatever it is, read a book, learn a language, whatever it is. When you get hurt, have that list of things. So instead of sitting around the couch watching TV all day, feeling sorry for yourself, start checking those things off. You know what I
Right,
mean?
yeah.
And because I've literally smashed probably everything on me, right? I've that list turned into a good thing. So now I don't look at those injuries and go like, oh shit, I sat around fucking drinking beer on my couch all day watching shitty movies. I go, oh, I learned the Rubik's Cube, and now I can kind of speak Spanish, and you know what I mean? So like, it's
yeah, and that's like an attribute to obviously your, you know, a huge part of your success is your work ethic. You know, stay grinding. You just stay grinding no matter what. Like you put in more hours than the normal person. And then, but also, you know, going back to earlier kind of things, like, you know, you're, I think kind of the way to like, where you're unique from a lot of entrepreneurs is like where, you know, you're a tastemaker. Like you, that thing in you that is unique, that, you know, that's not something you can teach somebody, but it's to be able to recognize, you know, what's dope, you know, like what's the cool thing. And often like ahead of the curve, you know, like that's been, and so and like, you know, and pretty much all the stories that you told was always kind of like you were ahead of the curve, and then nobody paid attention to you until all of a sudden there it is, and like, oh shit, Zinger's been doing that for like a couple years already, and then you got that, you know, from back when you were a kid, like, you know, they're like, oh, okay, that dude's onto something, right? And then you kept, you know, like it wasn't just a fluke for you, it was, you know, you've been doing that nonstop for decades, right?
Tastemaker, curator.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's because we're in the culture too.
Yeah.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Like the
Yeah,
people.
You're aware though.
You can't fake that shit. That's the thing.
Like,
You can't send Ashley Simpson's boyfriend. Like, he's not. You can't fake the funk.
No.
You know. Yeah, no, for sure. It's like eventually you'll get tested on if
Yeah.
you're real or not. You know. But taking it to another level, like that's what Jeff was just saying. But also like even more specifically, like so the concept of kind of what he was alluding to is this thing called Tool, which is like basically the theory of overall logic is what that is. But whatever. So like specifically like what I got out of what your answer was to Jeff's question was stay grinding, right? But then which is like, you know, that work ethic probably, you know, was instilled obviously, like, you know, your parents like grinded that into your dad is also like a, you know, a grinder, workaholic, but like specifically like a tool that you use like every day, you know what I mean? Like something that's like some in your toolbox inside your head, like how are you like, you know, so you see it before other people see it, but then how are you able to, you know, manifest, or like how are you able to like materialize these things into something that's tangible? Like for someone on the outside who's just like, I don't fucking understand Zinger.
Yeah.
You know?
I guess to use I understand the question a little
Yeah.
bit better now. If I went back to my younger self, I would say don't confuse motion and progress, right? Because they're very different things, right?
Yeah.
And as a young man, like you could just work. But if there's nothing there, or you're just kind of chasing your tail, you're just working. You know what I
Right.
mean? And
Yeah.
like there were, you know, countless hours, days, years wasted on motion without progress. So I would probably tell my younger self that. And then
Yeah.
also like, you know, like as every young man like goes through like well, hopefully, but everybody tries to find like their moral compass in life, right? Like I you know, like when I was a younger, like in my 20s and stuff, like we all did stupid shit when we were younger, right? But I wish that I had figured out what I figured out when I was about 31 or something like that. Like, you know, Mission Beach today is a lot different than it was back then. You know what I mean? It's kind of like the Venice Beach of LA back in the day. It was fucking pretty grimy and pretty place, right? So there was a lot of shit going on, and you know, I started looking around at like, you know, friends dying, people going to jail, you know, but I was always the guy that would go to work. You know what I mean? When everybody else fucking went to the bar and went to go party all day long, I was like, I'll meet you there later. But
Right.
the next 8 hours, I'm going to work. You know what I mean? But at some point in life, you got to go like, what the fuck am I really doing? You know what I mean? And I wish I did that a little bit younger. You know what I mean? Because there was probably some wasted years there. But, you know, at least I got there. Like when I was like 31, I can remember it was just like, you know, tons of the people that I were close to me going to jail, whatever, you know, really bad things were happening to them. And I was like, I got to take a step back, you know what I mean? And I never did anything illegal, never dealt, none of that kind of shit. But it was like, still like, guilty by association a
Too
little
close.
bit and didn't. Yeah, and I started reading all these like. You try to read the Bible, you look into the Bhagavad Gita, you look into the Quran, you start reading all that stuff, then you start looking at like philosophy and like you're trying to find what's for you, right? And like I couldn't find anything through I found good lessons through religious books, but it didn't like relate to me, right? So I needed something, everybody needs something for self, right? And that can be religion, which is great for you if that's what that is, but for me that wasn't it. And through that whole process, I started reading a couple of books about like near-death experiences. And there was a book that was like more like the clinical side of it. And then there was another book that was like short stories about people who had near-death experiences. And there were sort of like two truths that came out of it, because I'm big on facts. I like facts, you know what I mean? And, one is like everybody in the short stories, they say they see a light and then they see their life flash back in front of their eyes, right? And so I took that concept of your life flashing before your eyes and I sort of made it into my own little like self-religion, moral compass or whatever it was, because I just imagine the last thing you see is your life flash before your eyes. You were bad to people, treated people like shit, an asshole, fucking just like that moment of consciousness of like, I just fucking wasted this precious thing called life, and I was a dick. Like, to me, that would be the ultimate hell, right? Like, you see your life flash before your eyes, that's the last thing you realize is you blew it, and then boom, that's hell. Your life flashed before your eyes, you tried hard, treated people well, did your best, like, that's heaven. And I just broke it down into that simple little concept, and that kind of changed my outlook on the world a lot, you know what I mean? So I wish I figured that out about 4 or 5 years earlier.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I probably would have had a few less broken hands. And
Well, awesome. Thanks for being on the show, man.
yeah, no worries. It was my pleasure.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I have no beer left.
Whatever we got left, that's all we got.
This place
Cheers.
is awesome.
Thanks, Singer.
Yeah.